Your eyes are closed, your breathing is slowed and regular, and the only sounds you are hearing are the soft snores from the person sleeping beside you and the gentle chirping of crickets outside your window. Yup, it's easy to assume that when you're asleep, everything in your body slows down too, right? Well, not exactly. Here's what really happens when you sleep. From hiccups to superpowered skin, some pretty amazing things go down when you're catching some shut-eye. And now, thanks to modern technology, we know even more about what our bodies are up to when we hit the hay. So let's take a look at some surprising science behind one of life's most basic activities. When you're awake, your brain is constantly receiving input from your sensory organs, your eyes, ears, nose, hands, mouth, and skin. This includes pleasant sensations like sunshine on your face or the soft fur of a puppy, but also unpleasant ones like a bug crawling on your arm or the first raindrop hitting your neck in a coming storm. When you fall asleep, though, many of these inputs turn off. With fewer signals going to your brain, it can finally relax. But there is one sense that actually gets sharper when you're asleep: hearing. While you sleep, your brain processes sound differently than when you're awake. It filters out background noise so that even if your dog is barking or your neighbor is mowing their lawn, you won't hear a peep. At the same time, it becomes way more sensitive to noises that come from nearby. A study published in the journal Current Biology found that mice who were sleeping were much more responsive to the sound of an approaching cat than to any other sound, even the meow of a fellow mouse. The researchers believe this heightened awareness could be an evolutionary holdover from when our ancestors had to watch out for saber-toothed tigers. In other words, your sleeping brain is essentially still on the lookout for danger. But you don't need to worry about being woken up by just any passing feline. That's because another part of your body is working overtime to keep you snoozing: your nose. While you're sleeping, your brain blocks most sensory input, including the signals your nose sends. You do unnotice the smell of your lavender pillowcase or your freshly washed sheets or the delicious bacon cooking downstairs. You're basically oblivious to your own personal aroma. But your nose isn't taking this lying down. Okay? It works with your brain to release a chemical messenger called prostaglandin D to keep those sleepy signals in check. Essentially, your nose keeps your brain from going into snooze mode, so you don't miss anything important. It's like a really dedicated sous chef, making sure dinner does unburn while you're recatching a quick nap before guests arrive. Of course, when you do wake up, that sous chef might be in trouble. After all, dinner probably is burnt. But luckily for you, your nose knows how to make amends. That's because your olfactory center has receptors that sniff out specific chemicals. And when they find them, they send messages to the parts of your brain that control appetite and digestion, telling them it's time to get to work. Meanwhile, your nose releases nitric oxide, which dilates your blood vessels and makes you hungry. So thanks to your nose, you're ready to eat as soon as you sit down to the table. But while your nose is great at rousing you from sleep, there are other bodily functions that do the opposite. Hiccups are one of those mysterious phenomena that have plagued humans since we evolved. And while we don't know exactly why we get them, we do know they happen when the diaphragm, the large muscle responsible for breathing, suddenly contracts. The problem is, nobody's been able to figure out why. Well, a study published in the journal Sleep Medicine might have solved the mystery. Researchers studied 36 people who had severe cases of nocturnal hiccups, meaning they interrupted their sleep more than 20 times an hour. And they compared them to a control group of 36 people whose sleep wasn't disrupted. What they found was that the people with sleep-interrupting hiccups had episodes that lasted about 3 minutes each and happened once every 90 minutes. And each episode consisted of between 7 and 50 hiccups. The researchers discovered that the hiccup-ridden subjects spent less time in REM sleep, the stage when dreams occur, and more time in deep sleep. And here's the kicker: the participants with nighttime hiccups didn't even remember having them in the morning. They only noticed that they were tired from poor sleep quality. The scientists think that the hiccups may be triggered by changes in pressure on the diaphragm. caused by sleeping positions or by the muscles moving as you change sleep stages. If that's true, then it seems that our favorite sleeping positions aren't doing us any favors. So if you tend to switch positions frequently throughout the night, maybe it's time to find one that sticks. And speaking of sleeping positions, if you prefer to sleep on your side, you're in luck. That's because studies have shown that people who sleep on their sides have longer, fuller lashes and thicker, fuller hair. It's all thanks to a simple side effect of lying on your side. While you're catching some Z's, the part of your head that's touching your pillow gets more blood flow than the rest. That means the hair follicles near your scalp receive more nutrients and grow faster. On top of that, sleeping on your side reduces friction on your eyelashes, which causes them to grow longer and thicker. So if you want luscious locks and long lashes, just add sleeping on your side to your nightly beauty routine. Now if you're wondering what position your baby should sleep in, well, researchers recommend putting infants on their backs. That's because studies have found that babies who sleep on their backs are less likely to die of sudden infant death syndrome, otherwise known as SIDS. This is especially true if they're under 4 months old. That's why the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends parents place their infants on their backs for naps and bedtime. But even after reading that, you might still want your kiddo to sleep on their stomachs. That's because babies who sleep on their stomachs have a lower risk of getting a serious stomach condition called gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD. That's where stomach acid backs up into the esophagus and irritates it. So if your little one is showing signs of GERD, you might want to let them catch some Z's on their tummies. Now, if you're worried about your child choking while sleeping, don't be. Research has shown that infants who sleep on their stomachs or sides have a lower risk of choking than those who sleep on their backs. Of course, you'll want to make sure there are no loose blankets or toys in the crib that could pose a choking hazard. But in general, if your baby is showing signs of GERD, sleeping on their stomach might be the best option. So despite what the pediatricians say, you might just decide that the benefits outweigh the risks. Now, if you're a grown-up, you probably have some other sleep-related concerns. One of the biggest is snoring. If you snore, you already know it can be embarrassing and annoying for both you and your bed partner. But it can also be dangerous. That's because snoring is linked to a higher risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, and stroke. So you might be wondering what you can do about it. One popular option is a device that provides continuous positive airway pressure, or CPAP. These machines push air through a tube that's connected to a mask you wear while you sleep. Not only can CPAP help you stop snoring, but it can also prevent serious complications of obstructive sleep apnea, a condition where your breathing repeatedly stops and starts while you're asleep. In fact, a meta-analysis published in the journal BMJ in 2019 found that CPAP therapy can significantly reduce the risk of heart attack and stroke in people with moderate to severe sleep apnea. But we may have found a cheaper, more comfortable alternative. Researchers looked at 45 studies involving almost 35,000 participants who had moderate to severe sleep apnea. They found that using a nasal strip, which is basically a piece of tape with an adhesive on either side that you stick across your nose, was just as effective at reducing the risk of heart attack and stroke as CPAP. Plus, it's a lot less invasive. So if you've been struggling with sleep apnea and snoring, you may want to ask your doctor about nasal strips. All these years later, we're still learning new things about sleep. So if you want to stay up to date on the latest findings, subscribe for more fun science explainers. Thanks for watching.